Welcome everyone to today's explainer covering Chapter 6 of Alec Pakatides' Language Testing and Assessment. I'm your host and language assessment expert, and I am absolutely thrilled to dig into testing and assessing writing with you all today. Now, to help us bridge the gap between some pretty complex theory and actual classroom practice, I've got two fantastic co-explorers with me. First up, we have our postgraduate TESOL student. Hey everyone, I am so ready to get into the cognitive models and constructs today. There is just so much to unpack here. Excellent. And bringing that all-important classroom perspective, we have our early career language teacher.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to connecting these high-level theories directly to what actually happens when we sit down at our desks to grade a massive stack of student essays. Perfect. Well, let's jump right into this.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit 6 main areas: understanding writing ability, writing processes and tasks, designing writing assessments, scoring writing, reliability and technology, and finally, we'll wrap up with our key takeaways.
You know, before we really get into the weeds with writing, I think it's actually super helpful to do a quick callback to Chapter 5, which was all about reading. Reading is a receptive skill, right? It's all about decoding meaning from a text. But writing is fundamentally different. It's a productive skill.
Exactly. And as a teacher, I see this shift in my students every single day. They aren't just taking in information anymore. They have to actively encode their own thoughts using language symbols. And honestly, from a psychological standpoint, that requires a completely different level of cognitive load. Their working memory is just heavily taxed because they are simultaneously retrieving vocabulary, applying grammar rules, and trying to organize their thoughts.
And that cognitive leap you just described brilliantly illustrates why we really need a dedicated focus on this. So let's move right into Section 1, Understanding Writing Ability.
What's really fascinating here is how we define the construct of writing itself. You see, writing isn't just knowing grammar. According to Pakatides, it requires the integration of language knowledge, content knowledge, and strategic decision-making. And for anyone out there designing assessments, separating those elements out is absolutely crucial. You have to ask yourself, are you testing their knowledge of the topic or their actual ability to write about it?
Right, because writing is always done to fulfill a specific purpose. I mean, whether that's a quick personal email, a really heavily researched academic essay, or an elicited test response. The writer constantly has to balance their internal linguistic resources with the external environment and the specific prompt they've been given.
But I do have a question about the theory side of things. We talk about these components like syntax, semantics, and cohesion, based on Graben-Kaplan's communicative components. But how do these theoretical ideas actually apply practically when we sit down to assess someone? Oh, that's where the rubber meets the road. In my classroom, these exact theoretical components directly form the dimensions of my scoring rubrics. For instance, I have to consciously separate syntax, which is basically grammar at the sentence level, from pragmatics, which is their broader awareness of audience and tone at the discourse level. Because think about it, if a student writes a grammatically flawless essay, but it's completely inappropriate for the requested audience, I need a rubric that accurately reflects both of those realities.
So the crucial point there is that understanding those components tells us what to assess. But how does the student actually go about producing the text? Let's shift our focus to Section 2, Writing Processes and Tasks.
This highlights a really vital point for me. Writing is not just a final product. It's a recursive metacognitive process. If we reference Hayes' cognitive model from the text, writers are constantly planning, drafting, revising, and editing. It's definitely not a straight line. They loop back and forth between all these stages.
Spot on. And for our assessments to actually have strong construct validity, modern language testing needs to capture those stages. If we only ever evaluate a single draft final product that a student produced under severe time constraints, we aren't truly measuring the complete writing construct. We really need to account for the planning and revising that happens along the way.
And when we design tasks to capture this, we generally look at two orientations: linguistic-oriented tasks versus communication-oriented tasks. Matching the task to the construct you actually want to measure is literally everything.
Yeah, in practice, a linguistic-oriented task might be a sentence completion or maybe a dictation exercise where I'm strictly checking grammar or vocabulary accuracy. That's super targeted. But a communication-oriented task is much more authentic. That's your independent academic essay or a descriptive report where the focus is on context, overall meaning, and audience awareness. Both absolutely have their place in a classroom, but it depends entirely on the proficiency level of your students and the specific goals of the curriculum.
That makes total sense.
But if we are assigning these big, complex, communication-oriented essays, how do we ensure the prompts we design are actually measuring these complex writing processes fairly? That is an excellent question. Let's move to Section 3, Designing Effective Writing Assessments.
I can definitely speak to this from hard experience. If your instructions aren't totally clear, you aren't testing writing ability at all. You're just testing their ability to guess what you want. And topic selection is huge. I once gave a prompt that relied pretty heavily on knowledge of a specific local sport. My international students completely bombed it, and not because they couldn't write beautifully, but entirely because of cultural bias. Poorly designed prompts can accidentally threaten the validity and fairness of the entire assessment.
Exactly. And your anecdote brilliantly illustrates why topic neutrality is so critical. Alongside avoiding bias, ensuring there is an authentic purpose and granting sufficient time to actually demonstrate the targetability are non-negotiable standards in sound test design.
So, assuming we've designed a perfect, fair prompt, we now face Section 4, Scoring Writing Performance. This is easily one of the most critical and definitely the most time-consuming topics in Chapter 6. When it comes to methods, we generally have two main approaches, right? Holistic and analytic scoring. From a theoretical standpoint, which one is actually better?
Well, better depends entirely on your context and your constraints. I praise holistic scoring when I have to grade a massive stack of standardized exams quickly, because you're really just giving one overall score based on a general impression of the text's quality. But for everyday classroom assessment, I champion analytic scoring every single time. Breaking the score down into separate dimensions like content, organization, grammar, and mechanics gives my students the rich, diagnostic feedback they desperately need to actually improve their skills.
Precisely. And this brings us to the progression of scoring tools we have at our disposal. It ranges from a simple yes-no checklist to 1 to 5 simple rating scales, all the way up to complex, holistic, and analytic scales. The crucial takeaway here is that good rubrics, regardless of the specific type you end up choosing, are what support reliable and transparent assessment. They take the guesswork out of grading for both the rater and the test taker.
So, how do we actually build one of these? Let's systematically walk through the steps for developing a customized rating scale. First, you must consider the constructs. What exactly are you measuring? Second, identify observable attributes in the writing that reflect that construct. Third, determine your performance levels, say a scale of 1 to 5. Fourth, write precise, distinct narratives for each of those levels.
Quick question on that. Why is the narrative step so important?
Great question. Precise narratives prevent raters from guessing. You need a written description that clearly separates a 4 from a 3 so that any trained rater arrives at the exact same score. And that leads to the final step. You absolutely must validate this rubric with colleagues or experts to ensure high-quality measurement before you ever use it on a student.
But, even with the absolute perfect, expertly validated rubric, we still have to rely on humans to use it, and that gets messy. Let's transition to Section 5, Reliability and Technology.
Actually, I'll pose this question to the group. Despite having analytical rubrics and really careful construct definitions, why is grading writing inherently so subjective? Why is it so incredibly hard to maintain scoring consistency across different teachers, or even the same teacher on different days?
I'll be the first to admit it, I struggle with the halo effect. If I'm grading an essay from a student who I know is brilliant and works incredibly hard in class, I might unconsciously overlook their grammatical errors because I know what they meant to say. And that vulnerability is entirely human. It's exactly why rater reliability is constantly threatened. Beyond the halo effect, we also see extreme severity or extreme leniency. Plus, let's be real, after grading 30 essays, rater fatigue sets in, your cognitive load maxes out, and your severity might fluctuate wildly from essay number 1 to essay number 30. To combat this, the literature stresses the absolute necessity of rigorous rater training, using benchmark exemplar scripts, and standardizing our procedures. We quite literally must calibrate our brains before we grade.
But what about removing the human entirely? I feel like we have to address the elephant in the room here. The tension between institutions using automated software to grade the essays and students using generative AI like ChatGPT to write them in the first place.
It is a profound paradigm shift, no doubt about it. Automated essay scoring programs evaluate linguistic features, things like word count, syntax complexity, and sentence fluency, using natural language processing. The benefits are massive efficiency and immediate feedback for the test taker, but it brings massive concerns regarding plagiarism and construct validity.
Exactly. If an AI writes the essay and a machine scores the essay, it really challenges our fundamental definition of the writing construct. Are we testing writing ability, or are we just testing prompting ability?
And in the classroom, I can tell you, it creates incredible anxiety. Balancing the efficiency and reliability of technology with the authenticity of a student's true voice is the single biggest challenge we face right now regarding academic integrity.
It's a complex, rapidly evolving landscape for sure. As we initiate the wrap-up of this explainer, let's synthesize everything we've talked about with Section 6, Key Takeaways.
Our core mandated takeaway is this. Effective writing assessment doesn't happen by accident. It requires a crystal clear construct definition, highly well-designed writing tasks that are free of bias, the appropriate scoring rubrics for your specific context, and rigorously consistent rating procedures. High-quality assessment must provide valid, reliable, and fair evidence of a learner's actual abilities.
For me, it means moving away from those generic take-home essays and focusing much more on the process of writing, doing in-class drafting, and creating authentic, situation-oriented tasks where students can really inject their own personal voice.
And for my future research, it means continually questioning the construct itself. If AI fundamentally changes how we communicate, we have to responsibly update our definition of what writing ability actually is.
Perfectly stated by both of you. And I want to leave our viewers with this final provocative question. How will you adapt your own assessment practices in an AI-driven world? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer on testing and assessing writing. Keep analyzing, keep adapting, and we'll see you next time.